Happy Advent. It's interesting because we're still about a month away from celebrating a new year, but in the Christian calendar, this is the new year. Advent begins a brand new year, and it begins with preparing for the birth of Jesus. Before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to say real quick, how about the floor and the wall and all the things? How about that? There was a group of people who I probably will never be able to stand upright again, who were worked so hard on that. And some of them may or may not be in this room. I'm not allowed to tell you who they are. You give me a 5 after the service, maybe I tell you. But I definitely can't tell you publicly. So, but just appreciate their work so much. We're baseboards away from being done with that part, and it's just been absolutely fantastic. So, and just it's so unbelievable that we have spent $0 of church budget because there are $0 of church budget, and people in our community donated the material and the labor and everything to make that happen. So can we give them a really quick, good round of applause? I'm trying not to make eye contact with any of them so I don't out them. So today we're going to begin this Advent series, and we're going to be talking about how Christmas can still change the world. Because I think Christmas can still change the world. The story, the message, the meaning of Christmas. And I think it's one of those things that familiarity breeds unfamiliarity. That sometimes we're so used to Christmas that we forget that there's something embedded within this story that is a challenge to the culture of its day and to the culture of our day. And a challenge to the way we want to carve up the world and a challenge to the way the world was carved up in that day. So hopefully in this series we're going to be trying to bring those two things together. I want to begin by just a little bit about Advent. I didn't grow up in a church. How many of you grew up in a church that celebrated, observed Advent? Can I see a show of hands? So not many of us. Some of us, like growing up, I grew up in the Baptist tradition, and we didn't do anything like that. And it was one of the things over the years that has become so important to me, and it's enriched my own faith and experience, is being connected to sort of this global idea of church, that there are traditions that have gone on for over 2,000 years that our brothers and sisters across time have engaged in. And so Advent is one of those. Advent is a preparation for Christmas. The word Advent actually just means coming or arrival. And so Advent is about preparing for the arrival of the Christ child. It's about preparing for the birth of Jesus at Christmas. And Advent in its core is about waiting. It's about waiting. Anybody in here like to wait for anything? So every year we do some Advent stuff at our house with our kids. And we usually buy these little Advent calendars. It has some sort of nativity scene on it. And you open up a little window for every day. How many of you have done this before? And you eat the little piece of chocolate and you read the little Bible verse. Actually, you read the little Bible verse first and then you get the piece of chocolate. We usually do that. This year, our almost 9-year-old is into Legos. And I've been told you're supposed to say Lego. It's not plural. And I make fun of my mom for saying targets, but here we are. It's Legos, and it's a Lego Advent thing. And it's got 24 little windows, and when you open each one, there's a buildable Lego character inside. And we let him open the first one on November 30th because last night we were at the Jars of Clay concert and we didn't get home until like midnight. And so we let him open it a day early, but then he got home last night and you could tell it was just driving him crazy. He's like, let me go ahead and open one. This morning we're getting ready to come to church and he's like, hey, can I just open it now for tonight? I was like, oh, no. You have to wait. Advent's going to teach you to wait. I say this to my son and I stink at waiting. I don't like waiting for anything. I'm just trying to make him a better human than I actually am. Here's how bad it is. I love spoilers. Does anybody else love spoilers? Like when I'm watching a movie, if it's just too much and I can't stand to wait the next hour and 30 minutes to find out who did it or how it turned out or if those two actually did run away and get married and love each other forever, if I can't wait, I will immediately go onto my phone and look up the plot of the movie. And I'll read it all, and then I'll just say to Carla, it's going to be fine. And she doesn't want to know, but I can't stand it. And once I know, I want everybody to know, right? I'm a spoiler lover. When people are like, don't go on Twitter, you'll find out what happened on Walking Dead. I'm like, I'm immediately going to Twitter because I don't like to wait. And Advent is preparing to wait. It's waiting. It's longing. And it's longing for for a birth. The story of Jesus entering the world is what we're moving toward. But Advent is the period of gestation. It's the period of incubation. It's the waiting. And to quote the great American prophet Tom Petty, the waiting is the hardest part. And so we're going to begin waiting by reflecting on some of the elements of the Christmas story and what gifts they offer to us. And of course, the first week of Advent begins with hope. And so today we're going to explore a bit about hope. I love these words from Meister Eckhart, the great Christian mystic. What good is it to me if Mary gave birth to the Son of God hundreds of years ago, if I do not give birth to the Son of God in my time and my culture? We are all meant to be mothers of God, for God is always needing to be born. And Advent is this reminder that in every single one of our lives, God is waiting to be born. In our interactions, in the way we carry ourselves in the world, in the way we deal with our friends, the way we deal with our enemies, God is waiting to be born into the world. And Advent is that time of reminder. It's not just empty ritual. We do things that matter because they matter. Right? So we were decorating our Christmas tree. I went and picked it up from the tree lot last Friday, and we decorated it on Friday night. It just sat there in our house, lonely and naked, because that's how you say that in Kentucky, for a solid week. And so we're finally decorating it. And it shocked me how we decorate the tree every year. And every year, the getting out of the ornaments, I forget this every time, it actually ends up being really emotional. Because as we're going through these ornaments, we're seeing Cohen when he was like born, right? And we're seeing stuff that other foster kids we've had in our home have made, or their pictures on it. And it just brings back all those memories. And they're good memories, and they're also memories you grieve. And then we have this ornament from when my grandpa's church, the church we went to, burned in 1984. We have this ornament that every year we put on the tree. And every year, they probably get tired of hearing it. I tell my family the story every year. And I swear that still smells like smoke. That's what I tell them every year, and they all smell it, and nobody agrees with me, but I know it's true. And so why do we do that? How many of you watch the same Christmas movies every year? Does it change? No. How many of you watch Christmas Vacation and quote it word for word? Every time I'm at the tree lot, I'm just quoting that line. It's not going in our yard, Russ. It's going in our living room, right? And why do we do that? We do that because they call to us, like maybe remind us of the past, maybe remind us of the spirit of the season. They sort of feel like home to us in some ways. How many of you believe Die Hard is a Christmas movie? How many of you are wrong? Those of you who didn't raise your hand for Die Hard as a Christmas movie. All right, we watch these same movies, we engage in these same rituals, we put up Christmas trees, we do all the stuff. And I know some of it's just cultural, but I think it's for some of us, it's reminding us of the past, and it's something we want to pass on to our kids. And so in some ways it's about the future, right? That's what's going on there. And so we come to the season of Advent. And the story Jen read for us a minute ago about the birth of Jesus in Matthew has this quote: "All this took place so that what the Lord had spoken through the prophet will be fulfilled. Look, a virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Immanuel," which means God with us. Really common scripture to see used around Christmas time. But the interesting part of it is how the early Christian writers interpreted the life of Jesus on the backdrop of the Hebrew scriptures. Right? So for them, after they experienced the life of Jesus, and after they experienced the transformation that Jesus brought into the world, after they experienced God in the life of Jesus, they begin to try to find ways to articulate that story. And how do we tell people this story? And they began reading the Hebrew Bible again. They went back to their scriptures. They didn't call it the Hebrew Bible, they just called it the Bible. They went back to their scriptures, and they began looking through the pages of their scriptures, and it was like Jesus was popping up for them everywhere. They began to read the Bible differently. And so Matthew here is quoting from another text from Isaiah chapter 7. And in Isaiah chapter 7, there's a story about a king named Ahaz. How many of you ever heard of King Ahaz? Anybody? He was the king of Judah. So Judah and Israel, the nation of Israel, had split into two in a civil war. The north was called Israel and the south was called Judah. Ahaz was the king of Judah at this point in time. His father's name was Jotham, and when Jotham died, Ahaz took over the throne at the age of 20. And when his father died, he died at sort of a critical moment that this young kid was thrust onto the throne. And when he died, when Jotham died, Ahaz took over. The king of Israel named Pekah and the king of Aram, which is modern-day Syria, Rezin, had joined together, and they had asked Ahaz to join a coalition of those three countries, and they were going to attack the Assyrian Empire, which was the empire that was dominant and growing in that day. Remember the story of Jonah we looked at? The threat was the Assyrians? Same threat. The Assyrian Empire is growing, and they're a threat to the region. They're a threat to the independence and well-being and prosperity of the region. And so the king of Israel and the king of Syria say, let's form a team, and we're going to go preemptively attack the Assyrians, and we're going to defeat them. And Ahaz thinks that's a terrible idea. And so what Ahaz decides to do is he's going to say thanks but no thanks. But when he says thanks but no thanks, these two guys decide, you know what we're going to do? We're going to attack Ahaz, and we're going to defeat and depose him, and we're going to put somebody on the throne who will do what we want. And so in Isaiah 7, it begins with this story. In the days of Ahaz, Jotham's son and grandson of Judah's king Uzziah, Aram's king Rezin and Israel's king Pekah, Remaliah's son, came up to attack Jerusalem, but they couldn't overpower it. When the house of David, which is a reference to the king, right? Because David is sort of the once and future king in Judaism. And so the house of David, they'd been promised that a descendant of David would always be on the throne. All right, so when the house of David was told that Aram had become allies with Ephraim, another name for Israel, their hearts and the hearts of their people shook as the trees of a forest shake when there is a wind. Isn't that great? Like, would you ever describe, like, how did you feel? My heart shook like the trees shake in the wind. What does this mean? They're terrified. And what do you do when you're terrified? We tend to act impulsively. And Ahaz's impulse was this. By the way, if you go read his story in 2 Kings, he's one of the kings who are, they're said to be evil, and they've done what's evil. Ahaz, his name actually was like Jehoahaz, and he just went by Ahaz. So the first part of his name was Yahweh. It was about God. So he just sort of like breaks ties, right? So that's how you know the guy's in trouble in the Jewish tradition morally, is because he's sort of cutting off Yahweh. Go read 2 Kings 16, you'll see the guy's story. Ahaz decides, here's what I'm going to do. Instead of uniting with these two, which I've already said no to, now they want to beat us up, I'm going to appeal to the Assyrians. And I'm going to ask Tiglath-Pileser, if you're looking for a baby name, very good one. I'm going to ask the king of Assyria to come and fight for us and to defeat Israel and to defeat Aram or Syria. And the prophet Isaiah comes onto the scene and he says, this is the most terrible idea you've ever had in your entire life. You do not want to invite Assyria. If you invite Assyria in here, then you're going to be beholden to Assyria. Then you're going to have to do what they say. They're going to take over. You can't appeal to the Assyrians. It's going to be a disaster. You just need to wait. Because if you wait, these two kings who are coming at you right now, they're going to falter and fall apart. Assyria will take care of them anyway. You don't need to get involved. Right? And Ahaz doesn't believe him. And so Isaiah says, what is it going to take for you to believe? Brueggemann says, the king is about to appeal to a greater threat against a lesser threat, a decision that reflects short-term panic and long-term foolishness. I mean, that's rare for people in government, right? Boom. Okay. Yeah, and it's not just leaders that do this. It's all of us, right? How many of you have ever panicked and you did something in the panic that made the situation far worse than if you just stood back and said, I'm going to wait? Anybody ever done that before? Like, I'm just going to fix it. I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to fix it. And then it blows up in your face. This literally happened to me. And some of you have heard this story, but it happened to me in the 5th grade. I was one of those kids who, when teachers were like, read the directions first. That was never my way of being. I just sort of did it in wrong, and then they would correct it. And so we were in science class, and we had this big jar, mason jar full of baking soda, and we're going to pour vinegar in it, and we're going to make volcanoes, right? That was the point. So immediately when we get the stuff out, I just dump the vinegar in the baking soda because I'm excited. And the teacher says, nobody do anything yet. I was like, well, and I put my hand on top of the jar. Now, what's happening the entire time is there's pressure building up. And so I'm now like giving CPR to the jar. The teacher comes over, she says, what'd you do? I was like, I didn't do anything. cannot prove it. She says, okay,